Hi, I'm Siofra Bradigan, and this is Siofra's Magic Alcove. So, someone asked me to do a video on the Maiden Mother Crone concept idea of the goddess. I did a little bit of research just to get myself on the same page, kind of thing, because it's a very personal experience, I think, when it comes right down to it. There are a lot of different triple goddesses in different pantheons and so forth, and you can do your own research to figure that out, which one appeals to you and so forth. One of the most common being the Hindu um, triplicate of Sarasvati, Lakshmi, and Parvati, who are fascinating deities in their own right. But most of the people that think of the Maiden Mother Crone concept are looking to the lunar symbolism that a lot of neo-pagans use with the waxing crescent, full moon, waning crescent. The idea of going through stages of development, stages of life, stages of experience. I went to a Women of the 13th Moon ritual given that in Santa Cruz area by a medicine woman, and it was for the crones. The idea that you didn't become a crone in her culture until you'd gone at least 13 months without a period, so full on menopause, cessation of menstrual activity, etc., was one of the criteria that they used. And that's certainly one way of looking at it. So I have a wonderful vase that I painted that has the three fates represented on it as Maiden Mother Crone that I found in Goodwill one day. I think I did a video on that one, in painting statues and things like that. So in general, the maiden is looked at as the young woman, the virgin, uh, the female who has not come into her full power yet. She's still malleable. And when I was starting to study, I realized, when I came across the concept, I realized that my very, very first goddess was the Virgin Mary, even though I wasn't Catholic. I tapped into her energy because I felt she would understand me on a level that Jesus couldn't understand me because Jesus wasn't a woman, a female person. And although I wasn't Catholic, I did the rosary. I did the prayers to Mary. And of course, Moira, when I saw her full blown, looks very much like a vision of Mary. And so that was probably not much of a surprise when it came down to it, when I think about it that way. But so in the ritual, we did all of the young women wore white, the middle aged mother women wore red, and I think we wore red, and the crones wore black. I'll have to think about that. Yeah, I'm pretty sure because I belly danced for them and I was wearing my red outfit. So they had that association. Red probably because of menstruation, maybe. Um, White because of purity, that kind of thing. I think the usefulness of it as a way of conceptualizing the goddess energy is going to be dependent upon your specific needs and so forth. It's a fairly recent kind of a thing, really, when it comes down to it. Wicca was very much associated with that, but other neo-pagan traditions are also, use that as an association. And thinking of the moon as a goddess in her own right as a separate thing, which is why we have the drawing down the moon ritual to bring the goddess energy down. Why we do certain kinds of things depending on the phase of the moon depends on what aspect of that energy we're trying to tap into. And my perception of the lack of having any powerful female deity representations was because they couldn't get rid of all of them because women were part of the religion. and the virgin was the least powerful, the least potent kind of thing. And so they left her in. And her, she's like, in Christian mythology, Mary is just a vessel. In reality, she doesn't really have a role when she gives birth to Jesus. She is still like a virgin, supposedly. Just kind of a weird concept in and of itself. But okay, so I think all of the concepts that we have about deity, gods, goddesses, are ways, methods, interpretations that we use to be able to identify with the energy we're looking to identify with. The stories of creation, for example, of the goddess giving birth to the world and then seeing herself in a mirror of the universe and then splitting into two and becoming both god and goddess, is sort of one of those kinds of myths that sort of put the whole creation thing back into the hands of women, where in reality it should be, in my opinion, because it's through women's bodies that beings, spirits, souls from the other side have an opportunity to transit from that plane into a physical body and into this one. And, you know, and ancient peoples all recognize that as part of creation. The For a long time, according to what I've read, at any rate, men did not know their role in creating life. They hadn't made that connection at that point. And of course, everything around them, all the female animals gave birth and so forth, and then women gave birth. And so, you know, everyone knew who their mother was. People didn't necessarily know who their father was or that they had a father, as far as it went, I think. Who knows? I could be wrong about that, but it's it started really coming out when I was first being exposed to like Starhawk's material, and women needed some kind of archetype image that they could relate to, because really our experience of the world in general is very different from men's experience in the world, just as sort of a basic kind of reality of how things work. Um, Not going into gay trance or anything like that, just as basic procreation. Um, and we really didn't have any, what do you call them? Yeah, we didn't have any images that we could connect to, empowering images and so forth. My initial introduction to the triple goddess was basically the lunar image. That would be definitely the one, because you could, you know, from our perspective, she grew and then she faded, and you know, and the tides are all affected and they come and they go, and cycles and all that other stuff that goes along with it. So all young women are maidens in a universal sense, because they don't have the life experience yet to grip themselves with reality. That's the wrong word. Um, well, if you look at them as virgin and inexperienced, that kind of, and innocent and new and fresh and so forth, beginning their life cycle is a good way of describing childhood and youthful adults kind of thing. And then, of course, the mother is the one who nurtures. She's the one who, not, you don't have to necessarily give birth in order to be in the mother phase of things. That's just a one aspect of motherhood. You can give birth to creative impulses and processes and artwork and inspirational poetry or whatever in that particular phase. But on a physical level, it's marked by menses, by the renewing of the blood in the uterus and the preparation for being able to carry a child potentially to fruition and being that potential doorway between the worlds. Pregnant women have a very different kind of energy. I know when I was pregnant, I could feel it. I could really sense that shift inside of my body where part of me was physical and part of me was not. There was this, it's, yeah, it's kind of hard to describe. Anyone who has had that experience knows what I'm talking about in general, I think. But, and then the crone, is about reclaiming our elders, really, when it comes down to it, because in a lot of our cultural history here, um, we don't value the elderly. We don't value people who have a lot of experience necessarily. We look on them as like a burden, or they're fading away, they're going away. And yet we are the ones who hold the stories of our lives in our hearts and in our mouths to share with younger generations, to let them know the stories of how they came to be and what happened and what matters and so forth. And I think there is a difference between being a crone and being an elder, that you can be both, but not necessarily, because being an elder is not just about age. It's about wisdom and knowledge and experience and sort of a way of being um, in the world of magic and so forth. And a lot of times people associate the crone with death because the body is beginning to fade, the physical body is starting to fade. Uh, Sometimes the interest in life fades as well. Not always, depending on the elderly person, of course. Um, yeah, it it's sort of like dividing up the un in, undescribed force of creation of the universe into parts that make it easier for us to relate to in our human lives, I think. And certainly, you know, you don't have to have a specific name in order to relate to the triple goddess. It doesn't have to be a specific goddess that you're working with. You can just interact with and relate to the concepts of Maiden, Mother, Crone. It doesn't have to be tied down. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. In the beginning, when we were starting women's workshops, um, weekends, workshops, and things like that, I personally thought it was an awesome idea because many women did not feel able to just be themselves when they were, in a group of men. Not necessarily because the men were bad or anything like that, but because the women had been trained to cater to the men, and sort of repeat what they said and agree with them and so forth. Like when I was a kid, my mother told me how to things I should never do, like never win a game if I'm playing against a boy because then they won't like me. I always thought that sounded pretty stupid. I mean, if I'm better at it, I'm better at it. So why? And told me to leave something behind that then he would remember me and have to bring it back, and a lot of manipulation kind of stuff. And it's an interesting thing that in order to survive, historically speaking, women have had to learn how to manipulate men so that they can eat and have a place to live and have children and keep them safe for the last several thousands of years. Before that, who knows? There's some historical references to the idea of agrarian, matrilineal kind of societies, and it was discounted, and then now there might be more evidence to support it. And, our understanding of the past changes depending on what we discover and what we find and so forth. But we don't live there, we live here now. And these are the things that we need to work through as far as becoming individuals and so forth and ourselves. But yeah, we had some great opportunities in the all women's workshops and stuff like that to explore how we felt about life and all the other issues that are associated with that. When we were on our live show a couple weeks ago, and someone asked me about the sweat lodges, and that was definitely one of the things that I found very impactful. And all women's sweat was extremely visceral, emotional, intense. It has this core of um, life shattering and life affirming energy that goes through it. Like very, yeah, very basic. Um, and I had this kind of interesting things that pop up in your head. At one of the Native American medicine wheel weekends, I think the first one actually, it might have been the first one or the second one. I don't remember for sure. I was there 4 times, so my memories of all the events that happened there sometimes get smushed together. But there was a woman there. She was an older woman, and there was something about her. I just really liked her energy a lot. There was some calmness, some serenity, healing energy there. And whenever I had a chance, I would sit as close to her as I could get, just so that I could feel her energy. And she became one of my first models for what kind of an older woman I wanted to be, because that was another thing. What kind of humans do we want to become? And sometimes the imagery that comes along with it can help us to have some model to follow, some idea of something to be there. On a straight ritualistic level, it's sort of interesting that in almost every culture, the moon is considered feminine, except in Japan, where the sun is a female and the moon is a male. They always have their dance between the moon and the sun. So I thought that was interesting that they're one of the cultures that it is the opposite of just about every other one that I've read about. But yeah, so the idea of the changing seasons uh, coming up into the world, nurturing and being a part of, and feeding and exploring and embracing the world, winding down, becoming slower, dying, going into the underworld, not necessarily being afraid to face the shadows within ourselves because you have enough experience behind you to know what those are and that they cannot actually hurt you anymore. Um, it's sort of an interesting transition. It gives us a sort of a blueprint for when to do certain rituals when we're using the moon, which a lot of witches and pagans use the moon as kind of like the most obvious force that we can tap into because it's like readily available. And so if you're trying to go for new beginnings and so forth, the waxing crescent will add and pull energy up. In fact, with planting, I used to plant by the moon for a while, which was kind of interesting. And you would plant above ground crops um, during right after the new moon, during the waxing phase of the moon, and you would plant root crops after the full moon on the waning side of the moon because the idea was the energy of the moon would pull the plant down. So if you wanted the plant to grow up, you did it when it was increasing in energy. If you wanted the plant to focus on its roots, you did it when it was going down, in energy and was going underground into the dark kind of places of the world. And it actually worked pretty well. Sometimes you didn't have a choice, you had to just plant it when you had a chance to plant it. But it was kind of an interesting experiment, and I rather enjoyed it. Um, but it's not like there are you know, there's not a specific story about Maiden Mother Crone. That there's numerous stories. A lot of people associate Diana, Hecate, Persephone, and so forth with the Maiden Mother Crone. Selene is another one that has the three aspects in some ancient stories. When you think about, you know, creation, what is there? How did all of this come to exist? Where did life originate? Where did it come from? The great mystery of everything, right? This is a way of separating out the stages of existence. Without death, nothing grows. Without stars going supernova, there would be no planets. You know, it's like everything is so connected. You get the new thing happening, and it's all very energetic and exciting, and it's pushing out a lot of energy and so forth, and then it reaches its stride, and it just sort of like is there, just putting out the energy. Like our sun is in that mother stage, if you will, at this point, and then, you know, going through the death and becoming and changing and transforming. I think transformative stuff is one of the things we like to focus on from a symbolic point of view, like, you know, the cocoon and the butterfly, going from the caterpillar to the butterfly, all that kind of stuff. Metamorphosis. This is sort of like a larger concept of metamorphosis. And the cycles are all connected. They all sort of tap into each other. Those beginning stars that couldn't sustain themselves exploded out, and they created new elements. Without them exploding and starting in the beginning, there wouldn't have been the kind of stars we have now, because those elements didn't exist yet, and everything in existence was born in the furnace of a star. It's just so fascinating to me. I like that kind of thinking about reality and the nature of the universe that way, and how we are all literally star stuff, because that's how the planet was born, was from the elements that the stars created as they died throughout the universe and exploded everywhere. It's just kind of like a cool thing. From death comes new life. And you know, you can work with the triple goddess, the Maiden Mother Crone, without believing in the concept of deity, as just a symbolic representation of the stages of life and energy, and you know, the moon cycles and so forth. Or you can connect to it in a more literal sense, like on the full moon especially, and pulling down the goddess energy that's there. I rather was surprised when I did some drawing down the moon rituals, because the energy was not what I expected, and it's a lot more fierce than I was thinking it would be. I allowed it in. Yes. You never know in a circle what she might say, people. And when we were doing our group here and we were getting somewhere, starting to get somewhere, and on the full moon, the goddess would come in and teach people things. It's like, and make them have visions and whatnot. And being able to channel that was pretty spectacular for me. I really valued that a lot. It's also a very vulnerable kind of a state to be in. So I don't know how much there is to say about it, except that it's a concept that you can use um, to help with your own development as a woman or a female being, whether you're physically female or not. And I think that connecting with the goddess is also good for men. There's any number of men that connect the goddess more than they do with the god. And it's a way of healing, I think. Because in my experience with this energy, is accepting. It might be fierce, but it's loving and accepting as well. I met a medicine man at one of those weekends that I was at who was talking about the special powers that women have according to Native Americans that men don't. And that's menstruation, um, lactation, and creating life, birth. And these are women's powers. They are unique and special in and of themselves. And he got to experience them. He met a medicine woman who actually, I don't know if she grabbed his head, sort of like that though. She touched him and she gave him the experience of what it was like to be a woman. And he was amazed, and then he understood it wasn't anything for him to fear as a man. So that was kind of interesting. I liked him. He was a genuine healer, that guy. Um, so yeah, if you see somebody wearing the the triple moon symbol, that is the image of Maiden Mother Crone. You know that they're thinking about that and are relating to that on some level, or they just like the image, I guess, maybe. I don't know. But whatever works for you. And most goddesses you can kind of put into a category, not all of them though. There are some very complex goddesses out there that embody a lot of different aspects and different parts and so forth. So it's not like a straightforward delineation between the three aspects. It sort of bleeds in with each other. A lot of the Irish goddesses are especially are like that. I think the Morrigan and Bridget and then some of the Greek goddesses like Hecate and so forth are also very much more nuanced um, and uncategorized necessarily. Just depends on the stage that they're at. But life is complex, emotions are complex, experiences are complex, and anything that we use to help us to deal with the reality of the life that we're in and make us feel like we belong, that we have some support from an energy outside of ourselves can be helpful. I know that connecting to the Mother Goddess was very important for me when I was going through my trauma as an adult, and I needed to confront my own mother about her inability to protect us when we were children, and the fact that I had made an intense and vivid emotional connection to the goddess as the mother gave me a stability, I guess, a foundation upon which to be able to challenge the life that I'm in and to challenge my mother so that we could have at least something of a real relationship with each other. Because without that acknowledgement, I really felt adrift and incapable of having a conversation with her. I needed to process it. It was not something I could just let go of until I got an acknowledgement from my own mother that indeed her role was protector and she failed in her role. And that's the other thing is like, um, historically, mothers are pretty fierce in the animal kingdom. And I actually, when I lived up in the Kispiox, I connected to the mother bear because I knew I didn't have a mother in this life that could show me how to protect my children and discipline them, reasonably. And I needed some concept, idea, energy that I could use as a template to understand how to go about being a more protective parent and have a real mother's instinct. And since I lived in a place that had a lot of bears, the mother bear seemed to be a pretty good choice, and I chose the bear for that. And it was very healing for me. And I think that, no matter where you're at in your development, there's ways for you to find something out there that can teach you because the whole world is an opportunity to learn things from everything that's out there and everything that exists. So, so anyway, I think I've pretty much run out of things to say at the moment. So, this is Shiva's Magic Alcove, and I'm Siofra Bradigan. Blessed be.